Today's guest on the podcast, two very amazing women, CrisMarie Campbell and Susan Clarke. They are the co-founders of Thrive Incorporated. Together, they've spent 20 years helping men, women, and couples and teams resolve difficult conflicts and create strong, thriving relationships. This might appear to be more of a marriage counseling session for me. It totally is not. I tell a lot of stories, though. But they are awesome. They have a new book out called The Beauty of Conflict for Couples. It's available on Amazon. And they have a podcast, The Beauty of Conflict. And they have a new course that's coming out October 23rd called Relationship Mojo. So I'm going to post the links up to that. But you're going to love this dialogue about how conflict in your relationship might actually be the romance you've been looking for. So I hope you all enjoyed this episode with CrisMarie Campbell and Susan Clarke. Hi, and welcome to the Same 24 Hours podcast. I'm Meredith Atwood, author of the book, The Year of No Nonsense. I'm a former attorney turned writer, speaker, and Ironman triathlete. Although right now, all I really like to do is lift weights. We all have the same 24 hours, but it's what we do in those hours that leads to our greatest health, happiness, and success. It's my goal to crack the code on a life of less nonsense so we can all make the most of our 24 hours. So let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Same 24 Hours podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Atwood. I am very excited about my guests, plural, today. CrisMarie Campbell and Susan Clarke are here. Hi.
Hey, this is CrisMarie. Excited to be here.
Yes, and Susan, I am as well. So.
Awesome. Are we going to crawl all over each other like in a conference call? Susan here, Meredith here.
I hope not.
That's usually how we start, just so people can hear our voices, but I think they get used to it after a while.
That's right. That's right. Well, I'm excited to speak with you. Your new book, The Beauty of Conflict for Couples. So, wow, the beauty of conflict. Is that an oxymoron a little bit?
Well, this is Susan. We didn't call it the joy or the ease or the comfort of conflict. We did intentionally call it the beauty of conflict because beauty has depth. It's not just the good, it's the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. But when you put that together, that actually is what makes for beautiful. So we really did want to kind of give people a different way of thinking about conflict because there is so much possibility there.
And, for me, I grew up thinking a good relationship is one where everything is smooth. And I, thought, conflict, very, very bad. And I really, when I met Susan and we started I kept wanting work because we're romantic partners and we're work partners. And I kept wanting to leave. Like we'd get into conflict and I'd be like, this is too much. We're over. And she'd be like, no, I want to hear your opinion. And I was, even though she had was kind of yelling at me about it, I started to believe it and then started to share it. And lo and behold, when we hung in, we would wind up coming up with solutions that weren't originally my idea or her idea, but something new would emerge. And it really did become beautiful and fulfilling because all of a sudden now my voice mattered, where growing up, I grew up with an Army colonel where it just wasn't safe to speak up. Right. And all of a sudden things were different and I felt so much more alive. Now it's not comfortable doing that, but it really really had a significant impact on how I view my view of conflict.
Now, Susan, did you grow up? Okay, CrisMarie, you said you didn't have much conflict, but Susan, did you grow up?
Sorry, Meredith. I grew up with a lot of conflict. Okay. My dad was a yeller and violent at times. So I realized I spent 10,000 hours, Malcolm Gladwell's,
expert.
Yeah, exactly. Becoming an expert in conflict avoidance because every night at dinner was like running the gauntlet, hoping he wouldn't explode. So I learned a lot about how to change the subject, ask a question, rephrase what my sister was saying so he wouldn't get upset about it.
Got it. Yeah. If it's not romance and it's conflict that is the key to relationships staying together, wow, you just blew a whole theory there.
Well, just to be clear, it is the romance part that gets you engaged in this whole project. And frankly, if you didn't have that romance and some of that there, you definitely wouldn't probably even sign up for this, because relationships it's not simple, to stay in with somebody, because we both want to feel connected, but we want to be our own unique individual. There's a lot of tension in that, and try to put two people together in that, it can be really challenging. So the romance is what gets us in there. But frankly, the romance is usually a relationship with your own imagination, because, the minute you fall in love, it's mostly with what you think this person's going to be, and you don't know anything. And so that whole process of getting to know the other person, as well as getting to know yourself even better, that's where tension comes up, and it does lead to conflict. But that conflict is the juice and the resource that you'll have for keeping the relationship going. And if you opt out of that, then you kind of keep floating back to romance, but you actually never get that sense of fulfillment and satisfaction that you would get if you lean into the conflict.
So do you think conflict is a positive sign then, versus maybe if you're kind of new in a relationship and there seems to be a lot of it, looking at it as a red flag? Like, is conflict a red flag, or is it something to really just kind of say duly noted and let's embrace this?
Well, I mean, any two people getting together, some people say, oh, it's best if you're compatible in relationship. But really, that compatibility only goes so far. You're definitely going to wind up with differences. You're two different human beings. And being able to bridge that gap, learning how to bridge that gap was a skill. This is CrisMarie that I didn't have. I just thought, okay, it's your way. I'll give up. We'll just do everything your way. And growing up, I just felt like I didn't have a voice. My opinion didn't matter. My feelings didn't matter. What I wanted didn't matter. So coming into an adult relationship, it started to feel like I made everything perfect. And I was like, why am I still so miserable? Like, is this all there is? So learning how to navigate those differences is a life skill that, quite frankly, most of us weren't trained in. We had, like me, poor role models, and you don't go to school and they give you relationship 101 or conflict 101.
They should.
So I know, maybe they should. And so it's a skill that I think people can develop, and to know that you're not broken if there's conflict in your relationship. As long as you can find some ways to navigate it, you're going to be a lot happier, and your relationship has a lot more staying power. It's more of a marathon versus a sprint.
I think it's really interesting, CrisMarie, where you noted kind of you didn't have a voice as a kid. And I, too, did not have a voice as a kid. I think my parents would disagree. But it's funny, like, you look at what you're doing now, what I'm doing, we're like, blah, 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 voice. We want to talk and tell. And I think it's so funny because I just made that connection a couple of months ago, really, when I started blogging like 10 years ago. And I didn't realize that was kind of where the root came from, that I wanted to be heard. Although I never managed to hold back in my relationship. So I've been heard for a while. So let's talk a little bit about the kind of joint desire, kind of coming together as a couple. And there has to obviously be some desire and being on the same page with regard to how we're going to handle conflict. How do you advise your clients or the audiences you speak to kind of how to meet in the middle and start with the same goal in mind, I guess?
Well, I mean, probably the biggest thing is one, we talk about this, the two main ingredients to a healthy, thriving relationship are, one, the willingness to be vulnerable, to show up and risk exposing your own emotions, who you are, kind of really revealing yourself. And that means the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful, which is not always simple. So that willingness to be vulnerable is critical. And the other is curiosity, because we are a culture built around right, wrong, and trying to get the right answer, trying to do it the right way. But if you do that in relationship, you could be right or you could be relational. You don't get to be both. And curiosity really gives you a chance to, oh, wait a minute, you think very differently than me. And I need to be interested in how come what's going on over there is so different and why it's so important to you. And if I can keep those two things, my own vulnerability and curiosity, that will be the starting point and the most critical point to conflict, because without them, conflict is just a fight. And that's actually not even really conflict. That's just a fight.
Mm-hmm.
So
And I think what's important in that vulnerability is using I statements. So this is the part that was a real learning curve for me to talk about myself, like I'm uncomfortable or I don't think you're listening to me. Whatever it is, I'm saying that is that even though I'm talking about what's happening over there with Susan, I'm talking about what I'm thinking. So I think you're not listening to me. And I'm really sad or I feel really frustrated. I don't know how to get through to you. That's that vulnerability to be able to reveal that. And I was and I still can be like, Susan, you're doing it wrong. You need to listen to me versus, wait a minute, I don't think you're listening. And so I'm upset over here. Very different point of view into that conversation.
Well, even the willingness to say, right now, I just want to control you. I mean, that's an incredibly vulnerable statement, but it makes all the difference. Or I'm really defensive. Yeah. And when I used to do a lot of work with couples, what would happen is, we both get defensive. But that is that is not the same as saying I'm defensive. As soon as I bring that universal we in there, I've actually taken the vulnerability part out of it because it's like, okay, if we both say we're defensive, then it's okay. But I'm not going to say it alone. But if it makes all the difference when I don't know whether you're defensive or not. I know I've gotten there, or I know I'm trying to control you. And so I'm just going to own up to it. And that's
as soon as you own up to what is happening, it creates space for something else to occur. When I don't say it, then I just stay stuck and it's like the energy doesn't move.
Right. I literally just wrote down, I just want to control you because I need to remember that one because essentially that's my go-to. Really, I'm just trying to control my husband. Maybe if I just admit that, he'll be like, yeah, you are.
Well, it does shift the thing. And most of us, that's what we're up to a lot of the time. And we say control is a bad thing, but control is just a natural response to when we feel helpless or out of control. And if we could just recognize it as that and own it, it's a whole different ballgame. Then you kind of have a chance to make a different choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is a kind of stupid, but I bought a 24-pack of water. My parents are coming to visit tomorrow. My mom only drinks bottled water. And so I bought this 24-pack of water. I brought it into the house. My husband apparently carried it down to the basement. That irritated me because I need it where it was. He was trying to be helpful. And so this morning I was like, hey, do you mind going to get that water and bringing it back up? And I could have just left it, but I was like, because you have to go take everything to the basement. Why does everything have to go to the basement? Why can't we just keep things on the main floor where we need it? And, I just went off and he came over and he put his hands on my shoulder and he said, I will do it. Stop trying to control me.
I love it.
That's
but
great.
It's funny, like in that example, how we can just take it, run with it, right? I mean, I could have just said, hey, babe, can you go get the water? And it would have been done. But in that moment, I mean, the conflict, it was good, but how do we maybe not add unnecessary conflict by our own words?
Well, I think sometimes that happens when things kind of build up. You have some buildup of resentments, and so then they start squirting out. And a lot of times couples don't feel like those little resentments add up. So sometimes you just need to actually ask for some time to vent. Like, I am really frustrated. These are the things that aren't working. You always take things down to the basement when I don't want them to. Or Susan, she takes this morning, we were going for a walk and she was too slow.
I think I'm going to hear something.
Too slow unlocking the car. So I'm out there in the rain with the dogs and I'm like, lock your dog, but it's if you have the ability to kind of not be always so perfect with each other, like not have to frame things so well and have the ability to recover or just say, you know what, I'm frustrated right now and I'm just venting, that can go a long way towards taking more responsibility for what you are saying as opposed for it coming out kind of sideways. Does that make sense, Meredith?
Yeah. It's about just like owning your stuff, like owning how you feel and not apologizing and not acting out on it. Just saying like, I'm about to tell you something. This is how I feel. Can we discuss it? Is a great precursor. I know in my relationship, just to be like, I'm about to lose my mind. So here it comes, and he's like, okay, here comes the unreasonable Meredith. I'm ready.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
It's like giving warning. It's
Right.
Yes.
And I just want you to listen. And we even have in the book, we talk about actually dealing with anger, and we talk about a tool called the Vesuvius, which is because so many people, me included, had anger velcroed to violence. So anytime I got mad, I got threatened, or if Susan got mad, I'd feel threatened. And really, anger is that rising up of energy that lets you know something's wrong. It's actually healthy. And a lot of women are not comfortable with their own anger. And we're told to be nice and polite. And so separating those and giving a space with some boundaries, like it's 2 minutes. I'm not going to hurt you or me or any property or whatever. I might pound the bed or whatever it is, but nothing's going to be destroyed. And I just want time to express how upset I am, whether it's about you or just my day or what's going on. And a lot of that is it was a very vulnerable move for me to do. But once I started doing that, I felt more empowered, like, oh, anger is a good thing. And also I felt so seen and heard by Susan in my expression of my anger that I actually felt closer to her when I was willing to share that with her.
Yeah, I actually saw a post on Facebook last night right before bed. I wish I knew where I saw it, but it said something about anger and how a lot of us are carrying it around because we weren't heard as children. And I thought, oh, that explains a lot. Here we go again, childhood. But yeah, it's so true. I think I do this a lot in our relationship with my husband, but to just realize the power of a few words previewing what you're about to say. I mean, it's so easy.
And I think, go ahead, Susan.
Well, I want to come back. Yes, a lot of this all comes from childhood, but a lot of this also comes from a belief that relationships are about compromise. And we really actually believe that is one of the biggest myths that needs to be busted. I mean, there may be a time and a place for compromise, but frankly, really compromise usually means you give up a part of yourself. And we talk about this idea of relationship math, that one whole person times one whole person times one whole person equals a whole relationship. Now, if I only show up halfway and I'm always giving in, that's 1/2 times the other person may show up fully. That's 1, still equals 1/2. And it gets worse when each of you only show up halfway, because then you only get to 1/4. And so just even the math alone starts to show that you have to take that risk to show up fully. So if you're always compromising, eventually that's going to either lead to an explosion or an implosion, and it leads to resentment. And those are the things that end up creating the most damage to a relationship long term.
Mm-hmm. That's such a good point. And then top it off with general people-pleasing tendencies, like with your neighbors, with your school, with your kids, and then you're compromising in your marriage or your relationship, and you're people-pleasing everyone around you. Like you've got nothing % left.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. And that's when people get sick or develop chronic pain, or because they're not really expressing themselves fully in their lives, or at least, and we say, just have one person, and we're hoping it's your primary person, but one person where you can say what you need to say and be, your messy self, because as humans, we are messy. You look at your kids, they're fully themselves. They're pretty messy.
That's so true. That's interesting. You brought up chronic pain. I know none of us are doctors, and we don't play one on TV, but you've probably worked with enough people to see, you get someone comes to you and they do have this chronic pain, and then you kind of dig into their personality a little more and realize that there's a lot of that going on, a lot of compromise of total self.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure.
I mean, Dr. Sarno is a MD. He plays one in books.
Sarno. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was a big chronic pain sufferer because I'm a people pleaser, a perfectionist, and in relationship, I want to make sure everything's smooth. And when I recognized, wait a minute, it's okay for me to get angry and find my voice, my pain shifted dramatically. So it's a really, it's an epidemic in our society that we try to be nice and polite and hold ourselves back. And that's just all that energy that's got to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I had chronic neck pain when I was an attorney, chronic. And when I don't have it anymore. And I thought, gosh, well, it was probably because I was at my desk all the time. But I am sitting in front of a computer far more hours than I used to. So I'm like, it has to be that lawyer thing.
It does. You weren't liking the lawyer thing, for sure.
You know.
All right. So what if you're in a relationship and let's say marriage here, and you've been together 15 years and you think, I think I just married the wrong person.
It is so common I get coaching clients that think, oh, I just married the wrong person. And it's, you know what? You can go find somebody new, and we get far enough down the road, you're going to find out, oh, I think I married the wrong person. Because no matter where you go, there you are. And it really is so easy to blame the other person. But even Susan and I went on a yoga retreat. And I am not a vacationer. And about, 6 or 8 years into our relationship, she finally convinces me to go on this yoga retreat. And we get into this beautiful open air palapa. We put down the bags and I say, I'm not really happy in this relationship.
I could not believe that this was when he was going to tell me that. I was like, oh my God.
And Susan's like, wait a minute, we just got here. Like, I do not want to ruin our vacation. So she said, how about we do, and we talk about
How about we use these tools that we use with other couples?
So we did what we call a 5-5-5, which is a boundary communication tool where one person has 5 minutes to share what's going on about a topic, and the other person just listens, not reacting, just kind of letting it soak in. And then you switch, and the other person has the next 5 minutes, and then the third 5 minutes you have a dialogue. So it's going to end. So I always worry about being interrupted, so that's why I like the 5-5-5. And Susan doesn't want it to be a 5-5-45, so she likes containment. So she said, how about we do one of those in the morning? And if you want in the evening, and the rest of the time we go and enjoy our yoga retreat. So I was game. And as we did that 5-5-5 on a regular basis, I began to realize I was blaming Susan. You're not this. It's not, I had all these reasons why she was the problem. And over the course of that week, I really discovered it was me. I wasn't speaking up. I wasn't doing anything fun for me. I wasn't involved. Now I'm in acting and hip hop dancing and speaking, all these things that I really love. But it was so easy to make it seem it was really about our incompatibility and how she was the problem versus I wasn't taking care of my own needs and moving forward on my own behalf. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. I mean, a lot of it I've seen too is when you just make the other person your entire world. You're getting your self-worth from them. You have no hobbies, and then throw in a couple of kids and a job you hate. I mean, it's awesome.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It is.
And
that's when you think you're doing everything perfectly and you're like, why am I so miserable?
Yeah.
And you're miserable because you're focused on pleasing everybody else and you're not listening to the
Yes.
Exactly. And then when you realize that, then the question becomes, and maybe Susan, you could help with this one. Well, who am I? And what do I want? Like, how do you get to that inquiry? How do you get the answer?
Well, one, we talk in the book a lot about this process that, we refer to as boundarying. And, boundarying really, I think in culture it's gotten a little messed up because it becomes a lot more defensive about telling people what they can and can't do. We actually think boundarying is about the expression of what I want, what I like, what I don't like, what I want more of, what I want less of. And it's all about me bringing myself forward, not just a mental process, but what do I enjoy feeling? What do I, all of that, to breathe, to embody it, and to express it out in the world. And that boundarying process is what gives you the opportunity to start to find out more about who you are and what you want. And when you do that in relationship to another person, which is really what a 5-5-5 can be about, that's really what CrisMarie was doing over those days. And I was doing the same thing. If I didn't just get defensive, we had the opportunity to explore ourselves and begin to really listen to each other and discover what might be possible. So I do think that's the critical piece. It's not trying to figure out who I am, because that's a trick question.
Well, that's like question too.
It's very up in our heads versus who I am in this moment.
Well, what if you have someone who wants to do a 30-second 5? Like, you've got your partner isn't a talker and they don't talk about feelings. Like, is this a good exercise to kind of bridge that gap, teach them, not teach them, but allow them the space, I suppose, to learn to express? Like, what if you've got a quiet partner?
Well, there's two things. One, 555 does not mean that you have to talk for 5 minutes.
Okay.
There are a lot of things, like sometimes it's nice just to be silent and to breathe and to know that I'm not going to be interrupted if I'm not talking. Or maybe a 555 is, so you can vary it. You could get up and move instead of taking your 5 minutes to talk. So it does not mean it has to be 555, but somehow being in your own expression of yourself is important. And we have had couples do the 222, or the 30 seconds is probably a bit brief. I'd try to work on getting a little further along than that. And sometimes what we found helps a couple is if they do something else first, like maybe they do what we love around here is like a dance break. Maybe they listen to a piece of music or, something and that gets them into their body, and then do the 555, because there's actually more resource then. And so often people think of it as just a talking exercise, and it doesn't have to be.
You can do it while you're both taking a walk, which may feel more like generative in that mode.
It sounds like something you could almost implement at dinner time with the kids too. Like I could see having space for that. We often do high low, like what was your high for the day, low for the day. It was from that movie Story of Us from 20 years ago. And my son, he's a bit of a crab like I am, and he's like, I have no highs ever, it's all lows. And so that high lows hasn't been going very well. But I wonder, is there a way to do like a group 555 almost, where everyone kind of gets their space to discuss something? Like, would that work with kids?
Oh, I used to do a lot of work with kids and families, and that would be a perfect thing. I've never thought of it like that. I mean, I probably have suggested it in family meetings.
Book, The Beauty of Conflict for Families.
Yeah, and it would probably. And the nice thing about that is you can have different people at the table hold, really time it, because we actually do believe timing helps. You get a prompt and it keeps people engaged, and especially with kids. I mean, I used to do it with kids with the Vesuvius, because often kids need to express their energy, and parents are afraid of expressing their anger around their kids, but the kids love it when they see that it's okay. So I used to do that all the time with that, okay, the Vesuvius piece, where they'd get a minute or 2 minutes to just have a tantrum or make sound, so that would be the same idea. You could do it in different ways.
333 around the table.
Yeah.
333. If there's more.
I like that. I'm going to, figure out how that would work. All right. So what about the nagging small conflicts, like the carrying of the constant water to the basement, whatever, division of duties in the household, the things that just wear and tear over time and then blow up? How are you proactive to kind of hedge off those conflicts before they come?
Well, one of the things that we talk about when we're working with couples and things like that is to look at what are those reoccurring issues that come up. And then because usually what happens is they get addressed as just the reoccurring issue. So like your example of the water goes downstairs and no doubt water, it goes back and forth about whether the water went downstairs or not, which is really sort of not really the issue. So what we usually encourage people to do is look at what are their reoccurring issues, then really begin to tie those issues to what is that about value-wise. Like one of them for us is around money. And CrisMarie will often say to me, you're not saving enough. We're spending too much. And I can just feel like, oh my God, I just want to argue with her. Like, forget it. I'm not spending too much. And why are you on me about,
Right.
How it goes.
Fight.
Right. If I sort of say to her, look, I want to understand why the saving piece for you is so important. Like, help me understand what's driving that. So when I really started to look at some of her core values, which was this sense of security and safety, she's had family members that have had health issues, and she worries if we don't have enough money. When I really started to explore why that was important to her, it was very different And even she would say to me, why don't you care about saving? And I was like, I had cancer 4 times and never thought I was going to live. I don't think saving is the end and be all for successful life. But when we actually started to have what drove us around that money issue, very different. And I could then say, okay, well, I don't have that same security value you have, but I do have one around freedom. And I could see how we started to look at the whole issue totally different. So I usually encourage people, look at your reoccurring values, issues, and then see how do they tie into other more deeper values that you have, and have that conversation, because that'll help you when it, comes back up again.
Because it's usually, you're right. I mean, it's never about it's not about the water going down the stairs. I mean, it's about the fact that my husband needs external order to feel internally ordered. And so when he sees stuff everywhere, it makes him feel like he's out of control. And for me, when I see all my stuff laid out, I feel safe because I'm like, I can get it. It's all here. He took the batteries to the basement too. The batteries went to the basement 3 months ago, and I brought them back up. Did not tell him, put them in the laundry room because, you got kids, you need batteries all the time. I don't want to go downstairs. I just want to go to the laundry room. And so he comes up, I hear him down in the basement on Sunday. He's just rustling around down there. And he comes upstairs and he goes, where are the batteries? And I thought, oh no. And I put them, I told him, I was like, they're in the laundry room. And I hear him mutter, yeah, because that's where batteries belong, in the laundry room, So, but you're right. It's about that he has a core belief that he has to have his external order to have internal, and I can understand that.
Well, usually it takes it to a different place when you get there versus arguing about it and fighting about, okay, this may be one of those times where that value of yours about things being out of place is getting stirred up. And you need to know that for me, it's when the batteries are downstairs, they're just not where I need them to be. And that causes an internal angst for me. And we'll probably keep bumping up against this one. But at least if you understand the deeper level, it's usually not the same kind of, there's some empathy there versus just clashing with each other over right, wrong.
Right. So I'll tell you another story if you care. This one might help. You might have a good perspective on this, but we have the kids' open house tonight, PTO, open house, the whole thing where you go to the kids' school, meet the teachers, that kind of thing. And I have a very busy day. My husband has a very busy day. And so as he was leaving this morning, he said, I'll be glad to take Stella to CrossFit and I'll clean up the house for your parents and I'll get the dishes done. And he's telling me all the things that he'll do at the house. And I'm sitting there stewing because I said, I would really like to hear one important thing you would do instead of this list you will do. And he said, I'm not going to open house. And I said, but that's the thing. That is the thing that I would love for you to offer to do because I can do the home stuff. That doesn't stress me out. The going to open house and talking to other parents stresses me out. And he knows that. And so it was funny as he was leaving, he said, I'll go to open house for you. I thought, oh, that's so great. I appreciate that. And I said, but I'll go. And as he left, I thought, this is the most insane thing that just happened because I got what I wanted. And then I said, no, I'll go. And then as he left, I was mad at him because I felt like I manipulated him and then he just is doing it, but he really doesn't want to. And then I'm a bad mother. And, that kind of insanity is what goes on in my head.
Okay, I've got a great book for you. This is like the no nonsense sit for a year program. That is nonsense in your head that is getting you to the point of,
Isn't it though? You're so right. I should follow my own words here.
Well, there is a movie with Jennifer Aniston and I think Vince Vaughn, and it's about doing the dishes, and he's not doing the dishes, and he's like, okay, fine, I'll do the dishes, and she's like, no. It's not about the dishes. She said, I want you to want to do the dishes.
Right. Exactly. But that's sometimes, and it makes me question my own sanity, first of all, but it makes me question what that's all about. Did I just want him to be a mind reader in the first place? Is it me wanting to control him, to know that I controlled him, I won, and I'll do the right thing anyway? Like, what is it?
Well, it's interesting what you described because it sounds like he wanted to control the situation first. I mean, he offered you all the many things he was going to do under the conditions that eventually he was going to tell you very clearly, but I'm not doing this. So, and then you had your own style, like, okay, well, maybe all you wanted him to do, maybe you were up to some sort of control in that moment. I don't know. But I think recognizing that, okay, yeah, I didn't want to hear the long list of what you would do. I mean, you were pretty clear about that. I don't want to hear the long list because this is the one thing that is most difficult for me. But he found his way to avoid that. And and then he got you. And then in the end, it was like you weren't able to hold on to that he was sincere. And that would have been the thing to check out. Like, you say you're going.
Really?
And I mean well, because I'm going to hold you to your word. I think you could take care of yourself. And I'm grateful that you're doing it.
Right. And so right now at what time is it? 1:15. I still don't know who's going to open house.
Oh,
you know what I mean? I still don't really know. Like, am I going to call him at 4:30 and be like, are you on your way home? I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. But
I know that when I am, because I'm more the controller and take charge of a lot of different things. But I know when I'm afraid of doing something, that's when I want Susan to come in and rescue me. And then I get mad at her. Like, why isn't she initiating and taking charge of this? And it's really because I'm feeling scared about, I don't know if I can do it. And I want somebody to save me, basically. Right. But if she's grumpy about it, then it doesn't feel like she's saving me. And then I'm also I'm a perfectionist about how it's going to be done anyway. So I think
I want him to be joyful about saving me, and he is begrudgingly saving me.
Exactly. It doesn't feel the same, darn it.
Well, but and just to be on the other side of that, just
when he's not here. We don't have to take his thing.
I think she said the same thing about me. But the key, what happens when there's this kind of, you're asking me to do something, but you're not really telling me really clearly why you need it. Like, this is why this is important to me. Mm-hmm. And that to me does make all the difference in the world.
If I was vulnerable and said, I don't think I can do it, or I'm intimidated about doing it, so I want you to do it instead.
I'd be more interested in that. Mm-hmm. And I might say, yes, you need to know I don't really want to go, but I get it may be more difficult for you than me, or whatever it is. So, but it's a whole different conversation then when I actually understand, instead of what I can feel like is I'm being manipulated into going. Mm-hmm. And that never feels good.
Or blamed because you're not willing to go.
Oh yeah. Blamed because I'm not the person who would take care of her. Yeah. And it's like, oh my, then I get mad and then we have a fight.
Oh, that's so funny, because if I really told him all the reasons, like, my parents are coming tomorrow and I want my house perfect, because although my parents would never say they expect my house to be perfect, my mom's house is perfect, and I grew up in a house that is always perfect. It needs to be perfect. And like, if I told him that that's what my head is saying right now, even though it's nonsense, Susan, I know. He would probably have said, no problem.
He has compassion. He gets it then.
He knows. Well, he also knows that when I roll in the door at 9:00 tonight and none of that is done, then he'll have that to deal with.
Exactly.
Right. Well, he and I are both, I don't know if you know about the Enneagram, but we're number 8s, both of us. So, which is like the controlling, like neurotic numbers on the Enneagram. So like both of us we're both very power hungry.
Well, you just need to have areas of focus so you control different things.
Right.
And then talk about it when it comes up. Just own it.
It's true. Communication, you're on to something here. You're on to something. All right. What do you do with really big life stresses? I mean, that kind of like real big sickness in the family, or even kids. I mean, dynamics change the second you bring a child into the world. I don't care what anyone says, and everyone is lying about children. It changes everything. But what is kind of the advice that you give your clients and people that you talk to about how to handle the really big stuff that can just destroy communication and love, even, or romance rather?
Well, I think a lot of times we have a lot of feelings about what's happening and a lot of stories about what's happening and missed expectations. And really being willing to actually share, gosh, I'm having a really hard time. Because anytime you have a baby, you have a gift and then you also have a loss of singlehood. So you need to actually acknowledge both. But we kind of jump right over that and think, I should feel good that I have this baby. And really, you did lose something. And so stopping to acknowledge and digest that, even if it's for small little bits, is incredibly powerful. And catching up with yourself by feeling your feelings, not pretending that you feel a certain way, but really sinking in and allowing yourself to feel and sharing that with a partner.
We believe that a lot of times what's missing for couples is really taking time. Yes, time to talk about things, but also sometimes to breathe, to just be together, to sink in, to try other things that are not just verbal, mental constructs to communicate and stage your life, but to find other ways to really explore, be curious, and connect to each other that work for each of you. So, I mean, I've gone process painting with CrisMarie. I am not an artist. I don't even like to paint, but I went because painting means so much to her. And it was just something we did. We each had our own easel in this workshop. And it was such a cool thing to do together that was wordless. Or, I've taken her bike riding. It's not quite as much fun for her, but she's gone, and, but to explore things and even dancing, something that gets you more and breathing, gets you more in your body, but have it be more playful and fun and talk about it then. It's a way to take you out of just these big monumental decisions, but bring you back to more resources than just your head.
I mean, we're going through our book launch, which is, can be quite stressful. And, we're watching the numbers on Amazon, all these different things. And finally we just said, oh my gosh, we just gotta get out of here.
You can't do that.
And we actually literally just took off. We dropped the dogs off because we don't have kids, but we had dogs, that dropped them off. And we went to some place, and it was just actually getting out of our routine. And because it felt like I was in a ripple tank, like back and forth, the energy building, and it wasn't going anywhere except between us two. And just changing our routine. And then we took these long drives. We saw state parks. We just stopped on the side of the road. We never do that. We never take that time. So it could be something simple, but just breaking your routine, especially when you're so busy and it becomes like your relationship's like a transactional piece. Like, we got to get the kids. You take this one, I take that one. We got to go to work. And there's no space just for you two, because when you reconnect to more of that spontaneous adventure piece, you can usually connect to why you fell in love with this person. And
right.
There's an us besides all this chaos that's going on.
Yeah. And one of the, I'm just full of stories. I hope you don't mind today. My poor husband, he doesn't listen to my podcast, so it's fine. But when our firstborn was probably a month old, my husband used to sleep buck naked. And when our kid was a month old, I was up in the middle of the night with this kid. He was screaming. Nothing couldn't be consoled. A big problem. Here comes my husband, buck naked, trying to help. And I was like, if you think you're going to be helpful, buck naked, you have got another thing coming. Put some clothes on. Put some clothes on your body. And he was like, geez, okay, I'm sorry. And then he started sleeping with like little shorts. And I thought, oh, that was like a terrible way to manage conflict. But like in that moment, everything had shifted, having the kid. Like I never paid any attention to the fact he didn't sleep with clothes on, but suddenly that was like the really big problem in the room, just projecting I'm a new mom, I don't know how to handle this. And so I guess it depends on the couple, but he was resilient about it. He's like, whatever. But those moments of conflict can be really damaging when you handle them poorly. So kind of, how do you get out of the things that weren't really a big deal, but they're handled so poorly? How do you recover from that? Like forgiveness, moving on, and learning to kind of do better next time.
I know there's a couple of things, because rules can start develop, like, okay, now I have to wear shorts, for your husband, or this happens between Susan and I get upset about something. And so she's like, okay, I'm never going to do that. But you never really talk about it.
Yeah.
So it's actually being willing to talk and, how this was, because a lot of times, I was just venting. It wasn't like a forever experience. And so, but if I don't know the impact it had, and Susan's starting to do this, okay, I'm trying to think of a concrete example, but if she then started always wearing shorts to actually be curious about it and debrief those things, like, especially if you're thinking, hey, did this have an impact and I'm not aware of it, to bring it up and talk about it.
We have the way we've handled that, because I think that is true. Sometimes I'll make up rules because of some reaction she had, and I don't, but we will every once in a while have what we do around the 555 might be, what rules have you made up in this relationship? And so we'll just explore it. Or, again, even that what's working, what's not is a way to come back. What are the things I haven't spoken? And do it in a simple way, like on a regular check-in basis, like, monthly or something, versus most people don't do that. Most couples, like in businesses will have meetings to make sure they're running well. And sometimes they're not as good at strategic meetings, but that once they start having them, it makes all the difference in the world. And you kind of have to apply the same thing to a relationship. Are you having enough real contact and time to talk to each other to make sure that the little things don't just dissolve,
or the big blow ups aren't digested? To actually take some time to talk about what's working and what's not, and how was it for you back when I did blow up, or
to come back to those things. Because we have worked with couples where something that happened, there's one example 30 years ago, it was a misunderstanding and it almost destroyed their relationship until they were willing to go back and deal with it. So those little things, and it was really quite
well, she had just had a baby and they were having, it was around sex, whether they were going to have sex. And the way he looked at her, she was just horrified. And he was like, no, we're not having sex. And so she took it personally. This literally they started to sleep in different bedrooms. They became more and more estranged. We were working with them and we said, can you tell us what happened? And she said, he just thought I was so disgusting. He didn't want to have sex with me. And he was a doctor, and he was like, oh my gosh, honey, you had just had an episiotomy. I was terrified I was going to hurt you. So very different. And this was 30 years later, and they had become so brittle because they had never really checked it out. What did you mean by that? And that's one of the tools we talk about in the book, is how can you check out your stories that you're making up about your partner? Because we're always making up stories about our partners. Yeah. And we tend to think we know them, and so we're right. But if you don't actually have the conversation, you really can go off in a negative direction and create a big wedge between you and your partner.
Right. So, my husband just likes to make me crazy with the stuff in the basement. That's the story. End of story. The end.
He's so bad. Yeah. I agree. And that's what happens. Our girlfriends tend to agree with us. And so they don't actually say, have you actually asked? Or have you checked out that story?
Well, and it's funny about the shorts, because now we have teenagers. We have a she's a preteen daughter. And I'm like, you need to be wearing shorts anyway. It's fine. We won't revisit that one. It's already done.
Right.
As I like to control you. The end. Well, let's talk a little bit about your podcast and your upcoming course, Relationship Mojo. So let's talk about the podcast.
Yeah, so we have a podcast, The Beauty of Conflict. Our things are pretty easy to remember. We have The Beauty of Conflict for Couples, which is a book, A Beauty of Conflict for Teams. It's a business book. And our podcast, The Beauty of Conflict, is really about how to deal with conflict at home or at work or everywhere else in your life. So we have and we're going to have you on our podcast, actually.
Yes.
A little bit down.
I'm just going to talk more about my problems in my marriage.
And we have a program. We do Couples Mojo, which is a in-person program here in Montana, and that's in 2020. We also have Relationship Mojo, which is if you want to work on your relationship and your partner's not interested, and it's an 8-week program that starts in 2019. It's in October 23rd, and it's really how to work on, because we talk about the me, which is how are you actually, all the things that we were talking about in the beginning, Meredith, how to bring your voice forward, how to deal with your anger. Are you doing what you want? How to set boundaries and take care of yourself. And then we talk about which is all those relationship tools that we talk about. And these are also in the book. We'll use the book as kind of a little guide. And then how to talk about those big, important topics that everybody's scared to talk about or avoids, like sex, money, hygiene, whatever is uncomfortable.
Hygiene. Oh my.
Things you're going,
stink.
go take a shower. So, and you can do so much to improve your relationship just by working on yourself. Because if you shift, all of a sudden your partner's going to be like, wow, okay, what's going on over there? Because we have a system, our relationship's a system. So if one part shifts, it really impacts the other. So there's some of the things we have going.
Yes.
Thank you.
So what do you both do in your 24 hours? What is one thing that you can kind of point to that you do on a daily basis that really is a big contributor to your kind of greatest version of yourself? What's like one practice or habit that you've adopted?
Probably this is Susan, I'll go first, because for me, the biggest thing I've learned is that if I take the time to really lay down and breathe, and this isn't like meditation, this is like big full breaths, really breathing, feeling deeply for 8 to 10 minutes every day, I am a totally different person. And it really works well for me. So.
That's awesome.
And I am a big proponent of the artist's way. And I drug.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
So every morning I do my morning pages, and then we debrief with a 555. And that's very grounding for me, and really helps me kind of clear out the cobwebs and process through what's going on for me.
Yeah, the morning pages is, I think, CrisMarie, since we both obviously have anger issues, I think that I had started doing that probably a year ago, and it's a lifesaver. I just wake up, do that brain dump, and life is better. Yeah.
Yes, I love it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much. This was a ton of fun. I appreciate it.
Can I just say that our Beauty of Conflict for Couples is available on Amazon.com, and we're just.
Yes. I was going to tell them that. Don't worry.
Okay.
I was going to record that in the intro, but
perfect.
The Beauty of Conflict on Amazon. And thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Meredith.
thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of The Same 24 Hours. Remember to rate, review, and share this podcast. It really matters. I appreciate it. See you next time.